Andrew Conway, you're very welcome to the podcast. Pleasure to have you on with me today. When I think about sport and I think about business, the words that I associate are stress and pressure. And whether it's a sporting environment or whether it is in the business world, our ability to manage that stress and pressure is critically important. You've now moved into an area where you're dealing with people one-to-one. You're helping them manage that stress and pressure, whether it's in business or whether it's in sport. I'm curious, however, when you think about stepping out of a professional sporting career into starting your own business, there's a lot of stress, pressure involved in that. How have you made that transition? What have you implemented to help you in that initial journey?
Yeah, I think something that is not totally unique to elite athletes, but speaking to a client about this recently, first responders are on a different level, people who are out in the community dealing with like really serious stuff. So that they're like, on the front lines of whatever kind of battlefield they're engaged with. Elite athletes deal with a version of that in front of 80,000 people on a Saturday, somewhere between 25 and 80,000 people, and everything that goes in between, the uncertainty of injury, the uncertainty of selection, the uncertainty of scrutiny, public facing scrutiny. And I didn't know then what I know now, but what I'm leveraging and leaning on massively is my relationship with uncertainty now, trained from 12, 13, 14 years of constant uncertainty, and I think, a bit of fearlessness, tactical fearlessness, making sure like I'm asking myself the right questions, I'm doing things for the right reasons, and then stepping into the unknown. I think, there's a direct link to what I did as a professional athlete to give me the resources or the capacity to step into the unknown with the acknowledgement of uncertainty.
I really like that idea, that the relationship with uncertainty and working on our relationship with uncertainty, because I think the misconception is that I can ultimately create certainty. And yes, of course we can create certainty, but if we're constantly trying to create certainty in a world which is changing so fast, we're going to always feel overwhelmed, always feel anxious. So it's nearly the acceptance of the uncertainty and working on the relationship with uncertainty. And I like how you described asking yourself the right questions, regularly asking yourself the right questions to help in terms of that relationship with uncertainty. And is that something for you that you would have done, let's say, subconsciously nearly as a professional athlete, and you're now conditioned to step into the business world and be okay in that relationship? Or was it something which was more deliberate when you were playing?
Probably unaware of it playing, to be honest. It was actually more when you have the time, when you've stepped away and given great advice by a lot of people I have huge levels of respect for, to take a bit of time, not rush into feeling like you have to have a title, or, what happens is, you're retired a wet day, and you're walking down the street. What do you do next? What are you doing next? And even some of my mates who are going through it now, they're like, it's unbelievable that, and listen, it's no one or very few people are coming at it with any tinge of, a negative tinge on it. It's just, a natural conversation starter. But that happens, twice a day, 7 days a week. I'm just throwing a random number out there. After 2 months, you're going, geez, what am I doing next? Should I have a better answer for people? So I suppose it really, whenever I took the advice, took that time, you're now starting to, settle into a new way of, thinking about the future, as opposed to the conditioned way of, being an active athlete and knowing that you have to be here at a certain time. You have to do this. This is the training requirements. This is the operating model outside of the whistle to whistle stuff that is going to serve me, the individual, to give my best for the team. Now that's, not directly relevant, but you're starting to go, well, what are the parts that are relevant? And to touch back on the questions that I got value from asking myself in terms of what the next steps were, it would have been, what do I think I can get world class at? And what's going to give me energy? And those two things likely are connected by what I enjoy doing. Do you know what I mean? And when I say I use the word world class deliberately, that's a goal's probably not the right word, but it's an aspiration that if I feel like it's possible, I'll have enough energy and enough bandwidth and enough kind of grit, or I'm certainly putting the chips in the best place to have those things to chase that potential outcome, acknowledging that it's almost an infinite game.
Yes. I like the two questions as well, because I think far too often let's use an example. When I'm growing up and someone says to me, what do you want to be when you're older? Generally, I'm not going to turn around and say an accountant or a solicitor or, although they are fantastic professions. But when we think about our working life, we think about how long it is. You obviously want to be competent and feel good at what you're doing. But I think we often forget the second question, the energy. What's going to actually give me energy? And maybe another question to that is, what might I do if I no longer feel that I have that energy, or my work doesn't feel like there's any purpose to it? And yes, we can get purpose from other areas of our life, but if we're going to spend roughly a third of our time in work, we surely want it to be something that's going to energize us.
100%. I saw some recently, and I'll butcher and paraphrase, but it was something along the lines of the highest form of intelligence is designing the life you want to live. And I just think there's such brilliance to it, and it's very nuanced and it's very individual to, the life I want to live versus you want to live versus the life Dan wants to live versus our wives, girlfriends, all that stuff. They're all different, but if you can come at it, particularly as athletes, if you've been an athlete, rugby players are very different to football players, obviously in terms of their financial position after. But if you have a good career, you're in a healthy financial position as a early to mid 30s adult. So, now for me, it was about leveraging that position that I'd worked hard for and done the right things, behind the scenes, had really good people advising me in different areas. Now it's going, right, well, what's alongside the questions that I would have asked myself, what do I actually want my life to look like? So in 3 years' time, what do I want an average week to look like? And it's not about sitting on the beach, flying off to Dubai the whole time, but it's going, right, what's important to me? I have 2 young kids, as we discussed. Yeah. It's important that I'm a present father. So that means that, if I'm going into a career where if I want to get world class, I'm going to have to sacrifice 12 hours a day for the next 10 years, I can kind of cross that off, because those two things won't live in alignment with each other. And, you just start unpacking it bit by bit. Like, physical fitness is important to me because it's all I've known for my adult life. It's important to me to keep feeling healthy, both mentally and physically. Again, goes into that. If I'm climbing the ladder and it's going to require 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, it's probably not going to be in alignment with the other things. And, you start ruling things in, ruling things out, and then going, then you get a bit more specific with it, with the knowledge that I don't have all the answers. I can't have all the answers, but at least I've, intelligently, or certainly my version of intelligence, have gone about it in a way that I've now a lot more information than if I just went into things with, a bit blind,
I think what you've just described there as well is something which we downplay the importance of that conversation with ourselves.
Yeah.
You remind me of, there's 2 exercises I generally do with people. One of them is this idea of like a 3-year roadmap. And to your point, I always say you don't have to have the 3-year milestone completely specific. It can be a little bit ambiguous, but it's more of a feeling. It's more of a, what might I be doing? What do I want to be doing in 3 years' time? And the other exercise, and then we work back, obviously reverse engineer.
Exactly, yeah.
The other exercise is around looking at people's value areas and getting them to do a little bit of an analysis on, how satisfied are you with the progress? How satisfied are you with the time and attention each area gets? Because again, to your point, we can get caught up in the noise in society. And somebody could say to you, and I'm sure potentially they did, I get it as well, oh, you should do this with your business. Or in 3 years' time, you could be here if you do these things. And what's not taken into consideration in that conversation is actually do I want
Mm-hmm.
those things? Do
Mm-hmm.
those things fit with the lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
that I want?
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of crafting the
Mm-hmm.
life that we want, taking
Mm-hmm.
into consideration all of those value areas
Mm-hmm.
and having clarity on that.
Yeah.
And again, I think people sometimes, they misunderstand when we say clarity. It doesn't have to be by X time you're going to achieve Y goal,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more of a, I want my life to look like this.
Mm.
And I'm very clear on what I'm not willing to sacrifice
Yeah.
in that time frame.
100%. Like, you know, we're probably, you know, speaking, we're, you know, both doing something for ourselves, and you've different, you know, legs of your business, and mine's in an earlier stage. But, you know, exactly like you said, you know, what do you think about doing this? What do you think about doing that? You know, really questioning the hidden costs to it. You know, not just, oh, that sounds great, doing a bit of television work. You know, when I first retired, a bit of television work talk, and you know, it wasn't like the easy way to land on is, oh, you know, do a match a week. Well, how long does a match? Like 80 minutes. You know, an hour each side of 80 minutes. There's your 3 hours. But then certainly when I thought about it, it was more, well, if I'm going to do something, I want to be really, really good at it. So if I want to be really good at it, I can't just turn up and do it. So you have to do probably double that work to be nailed on. Maybe as you get more experience, that double turns to, you know, 1-to-1 kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's not like, it's just questioning the hidden costs. The temptation is yes, yes, yes. But you can say, like, and listen, it's a privilege to be in a position to have the option to say yes and no to things for sure. And it's not to, you know, be anything other than selective with both your time and your energy. You know, we often hear time is our biggest resource. I would argue that energy is in alignment with that, if not slightly more relevant, you know?
Yeah. I'm smiling again because, you know, what you're describing, it reminds me of situations that I've experienced with clients in the last probably 2 years, 3 years, where let's say somebody has worked in a company for like 15, 20 years and it's such a part of their identity now. And then they find themselves in a situation where, due to restructuring, they've now been offered a redundancy package. And the initial stages of that obviously can be very jarring for somebody because this is all I've known. I've worked here for so long, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually, as you move through that conversation, they start to switch from the jarring initial piece to, well, actually, I've got a bit of a financial window here, which can allow me to think about what do I want to do for my next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And then you see them stepping into that. Okay, now that I'm making a change or I'm making a move, I'm going to be really deliberate about what I decide to do. But some of them make the mistake of, oh, that role has come up, I'll just take it. Rather than seeing the situation as a real opportunity. And the reason I feed that back is because I see you now really analyzing, okay, where do I want to be spending my time? What do I feel I can get really good at and offer a lot of value that will energize me? Rather than jumping into, okay, yeah, that could be good, that could be good, that could be good. You're being really meticulous around what you're putting your time and energy into.
Yeah. Yeah. And listen, it's not a straight line, isn't it? It's not, you know, there's temptations there. There's, oh God, that might be, you know, that might be worth it. And it's not, I don't have an exact formula in terms of how to navigate those things. And I'm not saying that, you know, the phone is hopping off, like, you know, it's probably buzzing there with opportunity. It's not, like, you know what I mean? It's just, how can you, for me anyway, can I be as consistent with what I'm doing? And as I said to you before, like a great Rassi Erasmus quote, who's one of my ex coaches, was, keep the main thing the main thing. I think it just sums up so much, and it crosses from professional to personal. It often is on my mind, you know. And I know we're probably not going to talk a huge amount of rugby today. Like, I've been blessed with some of the people that I've, you know, Rassi Erasmus, Joe Schmidt, Andy Farrell, coaches wise. It's not even talking about Felix Jones, Paul O'Connell, who were teammates as well. The list goes on and on and on. And it doesn't escape me how fortunate I was to spend 10, 12 years in rooms with these type of people and learning both formally and informally. So it's really helped shape the way I process and kind of and think and work things out.
And actually, now that you've moved in that direction, I'd love to ask you a question on that. Because when we were chatting, you're talking about your role being in that area of performance strategy and helping in terms of the performance environment. And again, you don't necessarily need to name names here, but I suppose, what did you notice from specific coaches? Which ones, or what were the behaviors, let's say, that really created environments where the best possible performance could be accomplished?
Yeah. So I think each coach brings something different, obviously, different styles, different communication styles, different player relationships, just different everything, really. You know, there will be crossover, but I suppose if I was to try and simplify it for you, the best coaches that I've worked with have challenged and held the individuals and the collective to incredibly high standard, Monday to Friday meaning the training week.
Yeah.
And then they've released you out into performance day, into match day. But it's easy to say released you out. What does that actually mean? That means, I'll give you a RASI example. Ultimately, you knew when you were, before you left the team hotel or before you left the change room to go out onto the pitch, the only thing he now cared about, or the messaging was so consistent, it's now all about physicality. And like, you know, physicality is a broad word. Lots of things come under that. But as a player, you've got lots of cognitive load that you've been managing from Monday to Friday. And if you're still carrying that into Saturday being game day, you kind of, what is the main thing today? And again, you're not consciously asking yourself this question, but you're now looking at a sheet of paper that you're going, okay, well, I have to do this, and the list goes on by 10. I think the genius is in the simplifying of it.
Yes.
And simplifying it to the highest value focus point. Because a lot if we speak to the physicality piece, lots of things will fall under physicality that we don't need. If we're physical, if we're physical, being A, B, C, D, and E, and F will very, very likely happen. So don't worry about B to F. Just get A right, and there's your A to F. Do you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And as you say, when you're heading into that performance arena, which it could be a game or it could be a pitch if you're in a sales team, or it could be an update if you're working on a project within the corporate world, the last thing you want is for all of these things to be running through your mind, you know, for you ultimately to be analyzing when you're actually in the moment. So the ability then to put the focus on, as you said in that example, physicality, bring it back to that, you know, simple thing time and time again. It allows you, like what I'm reminded of is the inner game of tennis or the inner game of work. I don't know if you've come across that, Timothy Galloway.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, and he talks about that idea of kind of system 1 and system 2. And the prime example would be, if you look at a professional tennis player, they generally have those kind of reset routines where they might do something physical after a point just to switch them back on, but they're not analyzing, okay, what went wrong in that moment, or what. They're not thinking about that because that's already been done. All that work has been done. And it's just, okay, how do I reset now? And nearly let the automatic processes take over. 100%. Because the time to be over-analyzing is not now that I'm in it. So that's what I got from what you said.
And as you were talking there, like what I try and do myself, right? Because it also within that team environment, it's the individual's job to get him or herself in the right pitch, the right mental pitch. The coach or the manager, your teammates can only do so much. There is accountability for the player to do what he needs to do or she needs to do. But if we talk about that physicality word, so that again, that's broad. Even working with rugby players now, like what's going to give you the best chance to be physical? So there might be a menu of 8 things. Okay, well, whenever you are physical, what is ever present? You know, is it getting off the line in defense? Is it accelerating into the catch, which allows you to accelerate into the carry? Let's use those 2 things. So now we're not just speaking about being physical. All we now have to focus on is getting off the line, which is in your control. It's not saying I want 7 dominant tackles. It's going just like upgrade the focus on getting off the line, because we know based on the experience we have and the intricacies of it, evidence-based, if you do this, you're stacking the odds in your favor. that you are physical, because ultimately getting off the line is in your control. It's a decision. You have to earn the right by doing lots of other things. But if we can make sure that all those things are effort based, are attention based, are decision based, then before we know it, we're in the right position to get off the line, to accelerate whatever it is. And if you get those two things for a certain player right, it's highly, highly likely your game can be built upon that. So again, it's not targeting 20 tackles, 20 carries. It's going really, really new, or really, really pinpoint into a couple of physical movements.
Yes.
And let the rest take care of itself. So again, kind of reducing the cognitive load.
Yeah. And again, something that's coming to mind for me as you're saying that is because I see a big correlation between sport and business. And I've had the pleasure of doing a bit of work with some football coaches and managers around their environment and how they set up the right type of environment. Mm-hmm. And I'd be curious to hear your take on this based on what you've just said. So one thing I find teams, both in business and sport, can be good at doing is identifying maybe a set of values, right? Mm-hmm. Here's 4 values that represent this team. Mm-hmm. And then they have some ambiguous language that sits underneath them. Mm-hmm. And where they really struggle is being as specific and as, simplifying. Mm-hmm. If we break this down into a behavior, what does that behavior look like? Mm-hmm. And I think the outcome or the consequence of not being specific is that it creates this conflict. Because if I say to you, Andrew, okay, one of our values is that we show up for one another as a team. Mm-hmm. That could relate to business or sport. Mm-hmm. But showing up for you is different to showing up for me. Mm-hmm. And now there's a misinterpretation around, well, actually, this is how I view showing up. Mm-hmm. But that's how Andrew viewed it. So now all of a sudden, we're at each other because we've misinterpreted what showing up looks like.
For sure.
So what I try to do with, whether it's a manager within a team or whether it's a coach in sport, is to press them on and, press them to the degree where, as you described, nearly the player describes the behavior. Mm. So the player says, okay, if I'm showing up, this is what it looks like for us as a group. Mm-hmm. But then being able to go back to those behaviors and analyze those behaviors and say, okay, did we show up today? And it's no longer subjective, it's now objective because we've identified the key behavior. I'm curious, do you see it in your world? Did you see it in your world, obviously going through your sporting career as well?
Yeah, I know what you mean, right? So I think it's in many ways, I'll talk to you about my current work, I suppose, is the easiest place to start. It's way, when you're when I'm working with the individual, I'm working for that individual. I'm not working for the team who he plays for. I'm there to serve them. And then by serving them, it serves the team. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's definitely something I wouldn't consider myself in position to speak with absolute conviction in terms of how to apply it to a team, because I think there's a lot of gray there, and it's fine. Yeah. Operating in gray is fine. It doesn't always have to be black and white, but whenever we're bringing, whether it's a team of 6 executives or a team of 12 people on a backroom staff for a sporting team or a wider squad of players, I haven't landed yet on exactly how to weave the group needs. The individual needs is one thing, and it's time consuming, but you can put the time in and you get really clear with those individuals what's going to move the needle for them in terms of the behaviors they expect of themselves and the values they're going to showcase to the team. But then how to, amalgamate that into a team orientated, phraseology or poster, still haven't, I can't tell you with any great confidence that I've landed on.
That's where maybe the challenge is as well. And maybe that's why we see it. And it is so common because it's not an easy thing to do. Whereas at the individual level, as you've described yourself, you're doing great work in that space, creating clarity for those individuals. And no doubt that's raising their performance. It's just interesting because that's what I've seen to be quite a challenge for people is how do we then take the individual understanding and then bring it into the collective. So maybe there is a space there that's certainly worth exploring and exploring more, and different things can be done in that space. Because I agree with you. And what comes to mind for me as I'm thinking about this is, and I'm sure you would have had this in your playing days, we read all the amazing things about the All Blacks and, you know, what it stands for to be an All Black and how they pass you're only keeping the jersey warm, you're passing it down to the next person, etc., etc. You know, I suppose aspects like that would help to make behaviours more specific and what's expected of the group to a degree. But still, every team, every squad is different. So how do we continuously make sure that we're accurately representing those individuals in the group?
Yeah.
I think people in business and people in sport find that to be a real challenge. But I also think that that's a real foundation to performance.
Yeah. We'll need to put the heads together after this one.
One thing that I'd be curious to ask you is, you know, career transitions for people can be very challenging times, right? So much so that I see quite a lot. People are in a role, you'll get them for a coaching session. They'll articulate to you that they're, you know, this role is no longer energizing me. I want to make a change. But then obviously our nervous system wants to keep us nice and safe, right? So we might have a big conversation on this and we don't make the change. We don't make that transition. And then I've had experiences with people where they've been forced into making the change. In your situation, you know, you were forced into making a change, forced into making a career transition. You know, what was that experience like for you? Is there anything, I suppose, you could give to listeners around how you manage that effectively for yourself? Because I'm sure you had an idea of what you wanted to do after you finished playing. But it obviously came probably a little bit sooner than potentially you were expecting.
Yeah. I suppose it from my perspective or my experience anyway was, I'll connect my experience with what now a version of with some of the work I do with clients, right, who are thinking, or, you know, maybe not ready to pull the trigger, but are certainly thinking the exercise that you do, that 3-year exercise, and going, right, how do I even begin to put any type of forward momentum here, right? So I might start there actually, and if I have the capacity to weave it in, I'll do my best to weave it together. So, you know, I was sitting down with the client having a coffee 2 months ago maybe, and, you know, conversation around, you know, potentially, you know, looking at doing something different, you know, what that might look like. And the thing that we kind of landed on was, you know, okay, I think maybe we were having a conversation the 2 weeks previously, and now we're having the next conversation. And between those 2 times, the thought was to, you know, peel out a bit of time in his week to sit down and just start thinking, just create a bit of cognitive space to start thinking. And it became clear after 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it was that he doesn't have the time. You know, the time is not available. Of course it is available, but you're going to have to really add, if you're going to add it on top of already incredibly busy work and life schedule, you're not best positioned when you do peel off the time to utilize it. So what we landed on was, you know, taking action is greater than making time. So in this meeting, instead of spending it, myself and yourself are now chit-chatting away, and I'd be taking notes and then compiling those notes and sending them back, I said, let's spend the next 15 minutes saying nothing. You get on your phone and connect with the relevant people, look on a recruiter website, whatever it might be. Just do it now. And it was quite uncomfortable for him because it just, the setting wasn't right. The time, he felt like he was under pressure. It was only 10 or 15 minutes. But ultimately at the end, and then within 3 or 4 days, I asked him to send me what the benefit of that was, you know, as the 24, 48, 72 hours came to pass. And the first steps of progress had been made. And within that, there was, okay, I can rule that out, you know, because I now have a bit more information about, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, from that experience, as just to name one, just this concept that taking action is greater than making time. You know what I mean? For people who are family, business, whatever, work, trying to stay fit, trying to be social, you know, your week is just jam. Like, what can you do to take the first bit of forward progress? And don't, like, and I know that it's a hard thing to do, and like, you have to be kind of brought, you know, you have to bring the horse to the water.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? But then I think once you can show people that is a real life plausible way to do things, then they start being able to think, okay, well, how could I do that? Do I need an hour to go to the gym, or I've only got 20 minutes today? I've got 25 minutes. No, I'll do my 25, as opposed to, well, I can't go because I only got 25. Just really seeing these a shift in how you frame how to actually make progressive or consistent progress.
Yeah.
I know I haven't touched on my own version there, but that's kind of where the answer went.
And I'd imagine, you I suppose what you're now encouraging clients to do was probably a big part of your process.
Yeah, a version of, and I am by no means perfect. Let's be very clear on that. Sometimes you're advising someone and you're selling, and in your head you're like, you don't want to do that yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As we all are.
Yeah.
Even something, and this is maybe going a bit off task, but it might be an interesting one for you. So speaking to athletes, right? The way I think about how they're going to maximize their potential is, what are the things that they're known for? Meaning, what are their superpowers? What are the things that the average viewer can say, this fella's brilliant at X and Y? What does the dog in the street know an international athlete is good at? Because they're the things they're why you get picked. Okay. Then if we're a fly on a coach's, or if we're a fly on the wall in the coach's meeting selection before a big, huge match, what are the potential reasons you mightn't get picked? So gone from one end of the spectrum to the other. That's where, in my opinion, most of your time, effort, and energy should be invested, either up here or down here. The kind of messy middle piece where we're kind of like everyone else, and a huge amount of time and investment and energy isn't going to return outsized results. That's what we're training for. Of course we want to get better at that, but that's what we're training for. That's what the coaches have set up, or our boss in work has set up situations for us to, do that to the best of our ability. But if we target either side of the scale, that is where we're re-leveraging and filling where it needs to be filled. And then flip that to, I'll speak on my example or my version of that, which is a work in progress. Is I know, or I certainly feel when if you're my client, I feel like that's what I'm good to great at.
Yeah.
But what's going to stop me from a business perspective moving to the next level, or actually phrase that a bit different? What's going to stop me having a bigger impact or adding more value to not just people in front of me, but a wider audience? Is social media stuff, is being able to get up and lead a conversation at the front of a room, not have to be reliant on asking questions. So like, they're the two things, my version of what the athletes kind of either superpowers or biggest areas for growth are. I actually have no idea what question you asked me.
Listen, I've captured two massive pieces of value there. First one was around the taking action versus making time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to resonate. It certainly resonates with me.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, which is, it's easier to act yourself into a new way of thinking than it is to think yourself into a new way of acting.
Yeah,
so, action is key.
Yeah.
And I love the example you gave with the client as well. You've got 15 minutes here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let's use this time to actually take some action.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what you said second, I thought was incredible. Like the knowing what our strengths are, but then also knowing what is going to be the barriers for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've a follow-up question on the barriers piece, is because that's the uncomfortable stuff, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
When you're up here and you're focusing on your strengths, it's like, I'm really good at this stuff. And if I can do this stuff all day, so in my world and your world, in similarities, there's, maybe working one-to-one with a coaching client.
Mm-hmm.
If I could do that for 10 hours a day, and those coaching clients just kept
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
through the door.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, wouldn't that be, amazing? But then you're looking at those elements of, okay, what are the bits that I need to start to lean into a little bit more?
Mm-hmm.
How have you found that? As in, I suppose the question I'm wanting to ask you is, how do you manage the discomfort when you're leaning into some of those things?
Oh, it's hard, man. Yesterday, I spent probably 30 minutes walking around the kind of green area close to my house, videoing myself for trying to do a 60-second video to send to a fella who I know going back years. We were same year in school, different schools, but have kind of always been friendly with him. He's in that kind of space. So we've kind of gone into, an informal agreement that, I'm going to send him bits on, he's going to edit and produce, but it's not about actually getting them out there. It's about that kind of in front of the camera piece. It's really uncomfortable. Like, I think I sent him a video yesterday, and then the emoji after was the puke emoji. And like the video I sent him was the best of 30 videos, and it was still horrifically bad. So I think where my brain goes as well alongside that is, the challenge for me is that things are going really good. So what can happen when things are going really good, and I didn't use the word great there, I said really good.
Yeah.
I can justify not doing. I can justify not closing that gap or filling that hole, because things are going really good. Like, you know what I mean? I would have, as I said at the start, I've bitten your hand off and things are going good, but I'm being brought more conscious. I've brought more conscious awareness to, you can't stand still. Do you know what I mean? And whenever things are going pretty good to really good, it's easy to stand still and smell the roses and be content. And this isn't about, kind of, what's the right words for this? This isn't about a unhealthy kind of ambition, but it's about being honest with yourself, and then as best you can lean into the uncomfortable with the knowledge that you like. And connected to this is, I think this piece is an obvious one. The world is just being shaped. Social media, we don't know where it's going to go in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, but it's an easy enough bet that it's not going to be less relevant, it's going to be more relevant. I think one of the other things that I find useful, and I have to be consciously making the effort to take my own advice on board, is investing in things that you don't know if they're going to pay off or not in the future, but you think they will. And what I mean by that is, an accelerator program that I've signed up for, engaging in putting together like operating systems that I don't know as of now if they'll have usage or not, but I have a good feeling that they might. So usually that kind of gut instinct is pretty accurate. So now, not just being content with the week, going, the one-to-ones went great. Felt really good there, and I stayed fit, and I was here for, I was collected the kids 3 times and dropped them off once. I was there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now you're going, right, did I spend my time without getting any feedback? Do you know? Well, I get the feedback from myself where I send the pukey emoji, but the work 2 or 3 hours yesterday working on something where I don't know what the next steps of it are, but I have a good internal compass that was 2 or 3 hours well spent, but there's no feedback in the immediacy. I think that's like, the one-to-ones are short-term, brilliant, doing well, adding value. The stuff that you don't know, you're not getting instant feedback, that's most likely a medium to long-term investment without any guarantees that time is going to reap any reward.
Yeah. It's kind of like what we were chatting about a little bit beforehand around, we mentioned the book Dopamine Nation, and you're describing really nicely there kind of strategic versus operational.
Mm-hmm.
So the operational gives us really nice dopamine hits.
Mm-hmm.
The coaching session, we get the initial feedback. We can kind of work on that, or we have our goals in other areas of our life during the week and we can achieve them. Whereas the sitting down and doing the little bit of work, not knowing whether, just trusting our gut that we think it could, that's key strategic work, but it's easy for us to avoid because it doesn't give us the same level of pleasure, let's say, as doing the task or doing the coaching session. And as you say, the danger can be that I don't do any strategic work, whether it's good or bad, and then I find myself in a situation where, from a business perspective, let's say, the pipeline runs dry, the coaching has gone great, but those clients are now finished. And what have I done to keep that pipeline reoccurring? Or also, in terms of scaling, scaling the business model. You could find yourself 5 years down the line, you're the best coach. But actually, when you look back, you go, well, the goal was that I wanted to build, 5x flow into a business that was going to scale and have multiple coaches. But because I was so busy and I was so operational, I never really spent time. So it sounds like, you're wrestling well with those two worlds of operational and strategic thinking.
Yeah, well-ish.
Yeah.
Well-ish.
Well, we don't know until,
Exactly. But I suppose the difference now is I can look back on my last number of weeks and see 2 hours was spent there, 2 hours was spent here, 3 hours. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now at least the proof is in the pudding kind of thing. Time and effort are being put in. Whereas before I could fill my time doing menial tasks or flicking on my phone or spending a bit extra time at the gym and, you know, enjoying the, you know, a bit extra spa time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of finding a kind of operating system that is spread a bit more intelligently, while also acknowledging that, you know, it's a work in progress.
Yeah. You mentioned something as well there a couple of minutes ago around, you know, you gave the example of the video and then you watching the video back, right? And I could be wrong here, right? But I would imagine you hold yourself to a very high standard. And, you know, I would be similar. And I have found, I can't speak for you, but you might agree, that at times I can be really critical of myself. You know, so I can hold myself to that standard and be very critical. Some days are better than others. And don't get me wrong, that's a key element of, I think, in order to be successful in any endeavor, you've got to be critical of yourself. But when we think of a sporting environment, you can be critical of yourself, but you can also have coaches regularly giving you feedback, you know, other players giving you feedback. How do you source that feedback now for yourself, running your business, to ensure that you don't become so critical that you don't send any of the videos to your friend? You know, how have you managed that process?
For me, it's divided into two. So I'll start with the client facing stuff. If I've prepared for the meeting, if I've, you know, maximized my attention, maximized my effort, and I've done my absolute best in that moment, which I would say is 98% kind of rate in terms of my controllables, the attitude and everything that I bring to the meeting. If I've done that, I'm able to, if something doesn't go well or it doesn't flow or whatever it might be, kind of water off a duck's back in a way, because I'm comfortable that there's nothing more really that I could have done there. It certainly doesn't mean I've not got one or two things wrong, but do you know what I mean? Whenever I know what the process is to give myself the best chance to add value, and if that's been stuck to, it's quite easy for me to take it on the chin and move on. Say this video one, you're 100% right. You know, high standards, but absolutely low ability level. Do you know what I mean? So I'm getting in my own way. I'm like walking around between takes, saying like, this is torture. You know what I mean? Really critiquing I'm critiquing an absolute beginner being myself. And you know, it's funny. I've actually got a meeting at 1:30 today with someone who's actually going to help me with the story I'm telling myself around this, because I think that's a big piece, and it's actually just having the courage to be a beginner. Because even though I've kind of been a beginner in my next phase since rugby, I've lent very heavily on the thought processes and the systems from that world. It's not like going into, you know, finance or banking or teaching, and I'm like, I've never done this before. I've done it in an informal way, in a different way. Now I'm kind of figuring this out as I'm answering the question. Maybe it's like just this radical acceptance that I am a beginner, and, you know, bring myself to the end of 2026. You know, one of the things we haven't touched on today, but is the law of least regret. You know, what will I regret more at the back end of 2026? Still having 2 or 3 videos out there, or will I regret more having 30 videos out there, 10 of them absolutely, you know, horrific, but 10 okay, and maybe the last 5 pretty good? It's highly likely that the second option is the better option, but the human condition will try and protect and try and avoid when things are going really good. Protect you from going, you know, protect you from the potential of failure when you don't feel it. There's an inbuilt ability to not take that little bit of a leap. Am I connect those things together?
Yeah, you are. And I'm hearing, you know, this is a different skill you're learning to a degree. And as a result of that being a different skill, there has to be an acceptance of, okay, here's where I am, here's where I would like to be eventually. And then there's this journey. You described it earlier on as well in another way, you know, I suppose, you know, what we're really good at, what's going to, you know, be the barrier for us. And then obviously trying to work and potentially close the gaps. And I see a lot of similarities with people who are moving through roles within organizations, and sometimes they decide not to go for the role because it does require that beginner's mind in certain areas, because you're now learning a new skill you're not going to be good at. And I think there's a massive piece around our value and the value that we bring. And now all of a sudden I'm doing something which I'm maybe not as good at as I am at other things that people know me for. And I think putting yourself out there, by the way, especially somebody with your profile from your previous life, right? Learning a new skill and having a lot of attention on you can absolutely be a challenge. Like, you know, when I started this podcast, nobody fucking knew or cared who I was. So all my initial episodes that I listen back to and go, oh my God, they were terrible, right? Hopefully it's a bit better now. But, you know, how many people would have listened to them? Whereas the added challenge you have is people are probably going to watch because they know you from another life. So I think, you know, that acceptance of the beginner's journey can be a bit more challenging for somebody like you, because there are more eyes, there's more attention on you.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think there's that word value and connecting it to the value the value that it will potentially return. Like that's what there's probably a uncertainty or is the effort going to be worth the return here? Usually my sense would be like, it is, you know, you just got to do it, and that can be an isolated thing like this, or it can be, you know, whatever it might be. Whereas with if we're speaking on the video thing here, truth be told, I don't know if it is, do you know, and I don't know if it's just not like, do I have to be like, just because everyone else does videos, do I have to be just like everyone else? I think that may actually be probably the more critical piece, because I would consider myself a bit of a, you know, non-conformist, or like certainly never do, or as best I humanly can, don't do things for optics, and don't want to follow the just what everyone else does for that reason. So maybe that is an internal bit of friction that needs to be resolved one way or the other. I don't know.
I love that pot as well. Like if you think about a pot now, what we're throwing into that pot is it actually a good move as a, you know, from a business perspective to do those videos? I think that's one variable. The other variable is, okay, it's a skill that I'm trying to learn, so there's a bit of discomfort with that. And then the other variable is, everybody else is doing it. You know, do I have to do it? Because naturally I don't like to do what everyone else is doing. I think that mix, God, we could probably do another hour on that. But listen, I'm conscious of our time. Andrew, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on today. Thank you very much for your time and all the insights that you've shared.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me on the Lead Well podcast. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.